Shock, nuclear bluff is turning into reality. Russia and the United States are exchanging threats capable of wiping cities off the face of the earth. America is deploying missiles in Europe with flight times to Moscow measured in mere minutes. Moscow responds with tests of new doomsday weapons. The world is teetering on the edge. Just how close is humanity to catastrophe? Footage that will send chills down your spine. Watch right now.
The doomsday clock is approaching. Midnight. After Putin refused to accept Trump's terms for ending the war in Ukraine, Russia and the US began brandishing their nuclear clubs. In the White House and the Kremlin, they started considering conducting nuclear
tests. The Russian Federation is currently attempting to use the topic of possible nuclear tests as what it considers to be the last argument of kings, a final resort, in the ongoing pursuit of its own strategic plans to bring about an end to the war. During this period, the Russian government has been emphasizing the potential for such tests as a means to influence the outcome of the conflict, hoping to sway international opinion and achieve its objectives through this demonstration of power.
The meeting between Putin and the Russian Security Council, Defense Minister Andrei Belousov suggested to the dictator to prepare for full-scale nuclear tests, calling it a response to US actions.
At the end of this year, the adoption of the new Dark Eagle medium-range missile system is planned. With hypersonic missiles that have a range of 5,500 kilometers, and in the future, the deployment of this system is planned in Europe and the Asia-Pacific region. The flight time of such a missile from German territory, where this missile system is planned to be stationed, to targets in central Russia will be about 6 to 7 minutes.
In reality, it was Putin and his cronies who first set the wheels of nuclear escalation in motion.
The creation of the Burevestnik made it possible to conduct tests of the Poseidon. There is simply no equal to this weapon. The President personally oversaw the implementation of this project from start to finish. The President personally oversaw the implementation of this project from start to finish. We are now seeing the results of the country's increased defense capability. And today, those abroad who wish us harm must. They should be preparing to approach our Supreme Commander-in-Chief with a bow, just so that this weapon is never used.
The statement by the US President about possible nuclear tests, as well as the launch of the Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missile, were responses to the threats posed by the Burevestnik and Poseidon.
Russia is conducting tests, China is conducting tests, but they don't talk about it. You know, we are an open society, we are different. We have to talk about it, otherwise you'll write about it yourselves. They don't have journalists who would write about it. We will conduct tests.
Nuclear tests are a serious step. Officially, the superpowers have not conducted them for more than 30 years. Moscow last tested its atomic weapon in 1990, the US in 1992. The key document regarding mutual deterrence between the two nuclear superpowers is the bilateral treaty between Russia and the US, New START, on mutual reduction and monitoring of nuclear arsenals. The document is valid until February 2026. But in 2023, the occupying country unilaterally suspended the treaty. Currently, in nuclear matters, China has the greatest influence on the non-proliferation regime.
Beijing has not yet had its final say. And let me remind you, it was precisely the reaction of official Beijing that once put an end to the matter. In the Russian Federation's attempts to destabilize the international situation at the moment of a possible use of tactical nuclear weapons against the territory of Ukraine.
It is no coincidence that after meeting with Xi Jinping in South Korea, Donald Trump announced work on a denuclearization plan for the US, Russia and China. According to experts, if Moscow does not abandon its nuclear rhetoric in the near future, in addition to American pressure, the Russian authorities will also start to feel pressure from the Chinese.
In addition to the corresponding military pressure from the United States on the Russian Federation and their pointed responses, we should also expect corresponding diplomatic efforts from official Beijing.
A sensation. A major meeting of the world's titans. Donald Trump and Xi met face-to-face for the first time since the American leader's re-election. According to Trump, the meeting went amazingly, but what lies behind those smiles? Deals, pressure, new agreements, or a geopolitical upheaval? All the details of behind-the-scenes diplomacy are only in our exclusive coverage.
Donald Trump met with Xi Jinping in South Korea as part of his tour of the Indo-Pacific region. The main topics of the meeting were trade barriers between the countries and, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war.
They moved toward establishing a more forward-looking joint agenda for political dialogue, which, in principle, is a very positive outcome of this meeting.
As a result of the meeting, the parties agreed to reduce the tariff on Chinese goods related to fentanyl, a synthetic opioid analgesic, from 20% to 10%. The overall level of US tariffs will reach up to 47%.
The fundamental issues underlying the conflict between the US and China have not gone anywhere. And these are very important issues, such as the fate of the island of Taiwan and the possibility of imposing tariffs on Chinese goods specifically because of the purchase of Russian oil. Well, Trump put it diplomatically. These issues were not raised, but in such cases, as a rule, when no agreement is reached. They say that we didn't talk about it.
The agreements regarding Ukraine were less productive, despite the fact that, according to the US president, Ukraine was discussed at length. Initially, Trump wanted to persuade Xi to reduce support for Russia so that Putin would agree to end the war. Whether the parties reached any agreement in this direction was not stated.
A strategic dialogue of cooperation has been established between authoritarian Russia and authoritarian Beijing. And to risk that, Xi, in exchange, would have to receive something more substantial and significant, something that would correspond to the high level of relations between America and Beijing. Given that for now the relationship more closely resembles the logic of de-escalatory actions in the trade and economic sphere, I wouldn't say that at this particular moment. Between Washington and Beijing, there is any significant or fundamental change taking place. A strategic alliance or dialogue has been established.
Donald Trump rated the meeting a 12 out of 10. By the way, this was the first meeting between the leaders of the US and China in the past 6 years.
Based on the statement, we see that there will be no tariffs on Chinese goods and there will be access for American agricultural products. It seems like a good statement, but how true that really is, again, considering President Trump's experience, let's at least remember Trump's statement that peace has been achieved in the Middle East after 3,000 years. I'm someone who reads news from the Middle East, and what's happening there doesn't even remotely resemble achieving peace in that region to me. So, Trump's statement that everything has been agreed with China and everything is wonderful. But let's at least wait 48 hours and then see what happens.
Trump said that he had agreed with Xi Jinping on a visit to China in the spring of next year. After that, there will be a return visit by the Chinese leader to the United States.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Shock. A real hunt has begun in the occupied territories. Horror and panic. The occupiers are conducting raids on men right in the middle of the streets. People are being grabbed without explanation and immediately sent into the meat grinder of the front. Families are hiding their sons and husbands in basements, but the enforcers are combing through everything. What is happening behind the scenes of the occupation of the Russian world? Shocking footage and witness testimonies are coming up next.
Ole, from the occupied city of Torez in Donetsk region, went to the local military enlistment office to register on the third day after his 18th birthday. He was immediately told, either you sign a contract or you go to prison. There is no third option.
At the enlistment office, they threatened me with prison. They said if I didn't sign, I'd be facing a sentence of 5 to 7 years. It was impossible to leave the training ground. The control was extremely strict. At every corner of the camp, there were military patrols.
The inhumane treatment by Russian instructors drove young men to suicide. But even those who withstood this pressure didn't live long. Those residents from the temporarily occupied territories who end up in the Russian army are sent straight into local assaults after only a brief training. Oleg was lucky. He surrendered immediately and survived.
The attitude of the command towards the hunters. Because we were from the occupied territories, they blamed us for everything that was happening, for the war. The command would often say, "Get there and we'll drop you some food." We'd reach the designated point, but nothing was ever dropped. We lived in the forest belts without food or water. We chewed on whatever we could.
There are many people like Oleg. The temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine have been incorporated into the Southern Military District. And there they plan to recruit up to 100,000 soldiers into the Russian army. This was reported by Dmytro Kukarchuk, Deputy Commander of the 3rd Army Corps of the Ukrainian Armed Forces.
Russia has officially incorporated the occupied territories of Ukraine into the Southern Military District. And now it is beginning to mobilize the local population. The occupiers plan to mobilize 50,000 to 100,000 men between the ages of 18 and 55. Previously, for the war against Ukraine, mobilization was carried out only in the occupied territories of Donetsk, Luhansk regions, and Crimea.
The Russian State Duma has passed a law that allows conscription into the army throughout the entire year from January 1st to December 31st. Russia has legalized the conscription of residents from the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. Now, mobilization can be carried out throughout the entire year. According to the new rules, after receiving an electronic summons, a person is required to report to the so-called military enlistment office no later than 30 days later. According to
CNS data, the occupation military enlistment offices in Melitopol have already received instructions from Moscow to begin compiling military lists of men aged 18 to 50. In Melitopol, they are once again going door to door checking documents, especially those of utility workers, construction workers, and security guards, people who can be quickly sent to the second line without any preparation.
Previously, mobilization activities were carried out only in the occupied territories of Donetsk, Luhansk regions, and in Crimea. Now, these measures have expanded to all occupied regions, which indicates yet another attempt by the Kremlin to make up for losses at the front at the expense of Ukrainians.
Forced mobilization in the occupied territories, that's what I was talking about. The number, let's say, of personnel in the 1st and 2nd so-called Army Corps of the LNR. From 35,000, it was already increased to 100,000 in 2022. Now, in the occupied territories of the Luhansk region, some towns are called women's towns by the locals themselves. Not because, well, let's say it's not meant as an insult. It's because of the complete absence of men. Total mobilization.
The losses in local assaults somehow need to be compensated. The number of contract soldiers and even the money for them is decreasing. Total mobilization in the temporarily occupied territories is an attempt to make up for the losses. Having survived and ended up in Ukrainian captivity, Oleg realized that his life in the Russian army wasn't worth a dime.
After joining the Russian army, I realized it's all bullshit because they just want to wipe us all out here. That's
all there is to it. And for more hot news from the front, tune in to our next episode.